So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what's going on here. So history. Okay, I can see your eyes kind of glazing over already and so on. So what I wanted to do before I start getting into all the boring stuff, I want to congratulate you on your foresight and your courage in starting this journey into what we call biological and energy medicine. Most of you are embarking on a new venture by attending this workshop. This weekend, Dr. Yu, the great Dr. Cook, Dr. Cass, Gordon, and myself are introducing you to a whole new world of proven and effective methods for determining why our patients are ill, and in many cases why they're not improving in spite of our treatments. But you're going to hear all kinds of stories from your colleagues, your patients, and your friends about how this is all just esoteric baldercrap. And they'll gleefully tell you that, of course, none of this has ever been proven, and it's never reproducible. And when you even think about the concept of what we're doing, I know your eyes are really going to glaze over. In brief, because I know Dr. Yu and Dr. Cass are going to be discussing this in greater detail, we're going to locate some specific acupuncture points on the hands and feet with what is essentially a resistance meter. We're going to measure the conductivity and resistance, some will say the qi or energy at those points, and based on some of the concepts of traditional Chinese medicine, we're then going to interpret these measurements diagnostically. Whew, that's really stretching the imagination a little bit. What I would like to accomplish talking to you today is to give you an idea of how these methods arose, how they're being used today, and where they can take us into the future. We don't have to go back to Pythagoras and Justinian and Paracelsus to understand that human beings have been using energy and herbs and natural healing medicines since the beginning of time. It is only in relatively recent times, as healers worked with allopathic and chemical remedies, that we lost touch with the energies and the more natural aspects of medicine. If you're interested in the ancient, and man, here it can be very boring, we can go back to 3000 BCE, we used to call that BC. Then I encourage you to take in one of the excellent lectures by Dr. Sylvia Binder from the OnDemand Company. And Dr. Binder always gives us a carefully thought out and presented lecture that nicely correlates the philosophies of the ancients and brings them into the present. But for our purposes during this boot camp, we're embarking on a journey to learn point and medication testing. You're learning from some of the best in the business with the 5 of us here. And between us, we represent more decades of experience than any of us are willing to admit. And I again commend you on seeking the best when you're starting out. The same kinds of pictures again. Of course, much of this point measurement method is based on the ancient wisdom of acupuncture. Dr. Yu even calls his approach acupuncture meridian assessment. However, as physicians and dental physicians, much of the philosophy and understanding of acupuncture and meridians is back into la-la land. As part of our history lesson today, I want to show you the relevance and validity of these methods. Dr. Yu and Dr. Cass are going to show you how all this is applicable in your practice today. And that, my friends, will open the window for tomorrow. Of course, the history and much of the philosophy of acupuncture dates back thousands of years. For those of you who have been interested in acupuncture, we are, of course, looking back to the time of the ancients, with some saying that acupuncture was first envisioned almost 5,000 years ago. But the first electronic things that we see, however, we can see the first instances within acupuncture in the early 1800s with such names as Jules Cloquet. I'll just mess up some of this French. Jean-Baptiste Sarlandier, Gustave Landgren, who was French, not German, and Guillaume Duchesne de Boulogne. Now, this gentleman is the founder of modern electrotherapy. And I found this pen and ink sketch of the first Duchenne device. Notice the hand sticking out over here. At any rate. Then we moved on through history to some of these gentlemen. This Dr. Hall is from Pennsylvania, USA. We're talking 1853 here. This is not something that's just arrived. Dr. Brindley in London electrified a 5-needle device that he was using. And Naughton Davies, a Welshman, was using galvanic acupuncture for sciatica. And this moved us into the golden era of acupuncture in France. Some of these physicians and researchers are responsible for bringing acupuncture to Europe and indirectly to North America, as OIRF transformed their French language translations of the Chinese materials into English. One of the most influential acupuncturists of this time was George Soulier de Marant, who started teaching acupuncture in hospitals in 1925. And here we already find the electronic applications. Dimier and de Marant investigate electric acupuncture. Dr. de Marant even stated at one point that instruments proved by their measures the existence of the force vitale. He applies both faradic and galvanic currents via needles. Roger de la Fouille in 1935 starts to use electropuncture by replacing needles with mild electric puncture and applying currents from his diatherapuncture. And note that here is where we first see a device that's specifically designed for this purpose. So already the electronics. Then in 1946, when the Americans were occupying Japan, they tried to eradicate acupuncture and mock Sebastian as being non-scientific, and of course in many ways it is. However, they did allow some of the study in the Kyoto University. Dr. Nakatani is very famous for his work with autonomic functions, and his method is called Ryo de Raku. It still exists today. In 1947 through 1952, there were a lot of publications. De la Fouille, Jacques Slavier, this Heribert Schmidt started taking it into Germany, and so on. This next one here, this is an interesting book that I've recently found, but it's been here for a while. And it's edited by David F. Mayer. You'll find a very nicely laid out chart that outlines the timeline of development from 2750 BCE, that's a little while ago, through to the 1990s. There is a comparison of the development of electrotherapy, that's not acupuncture, electrotherapy, manual acupuncture, which of course they're talking needling, and then electroacupuncture. But now to what we are learning about here today. Some of the first attempts to localize and measure special areas of small diameter on the human skin with high electrical conductivity, that's all in quotes, were made by a German physician, Richard Kroon. We don't know a lot of information available about him, other than in the early 1950s he used weak, low-frequency currents to locate 3 families of electrically reactive points. Some fixed and others appeared only in the presence of underlying pathology. That's an interesting concept. His method was called electroneural therapy and diagnostics. This research was explored independently by Jean Nimboyer and Jacques Slavier in France, and also Yoshio Nakatani, again in Japan. So before I continue with that, let me digress for a brief explanation of the basic theory utilized to formulate these amazing advancements, because this is where the Germans entered the picture in a really big way. Julia Tsui and Fred Lamb from the University of Hawaii. I was sad to hear that Fred passed recently. Both of these lovely people have gone to Germany with us many times, and Julia we owe a great debt to. Here's an excellent description taken from one of many of her studies done at the University of Hawaii during the 1990s. This is a fairly long quote, so I hope you'll bear with me. The theory developed to this point was that biological energy, known as qi in traditional Chinese medicine, is generated in internal organs and flows through channels near the skin surface, known as meridians. Acupuncture points, generally located on meridians, are where the flow of energy can be manipulated. The stimulation of these points by various means affects the energy circulation, thus producing secondary effects in connected organs and systems. The use of the word systems, as used here, refers to the source areas of bioenergy in body organs and systems. It is not to be confused with the meridian system, which refers to the complete network of meridians. A meridian, which includes the structure of the system of origin, the function of that system, the electromagnetic pathway, and its emotional or vibrational interaction, can be conceived individually or as part of an intricate network. The synergistic totality of the meridian system is fundamental. Although various mechanisms to explain acupuncture have been offered, the electromagnetic model fits best. Analogically, the system can be compared with energy fields connected by wiring. A small dose of electromagnetic energy introduced through an acupuncture point flows to the connected system and affects it. anything that alters system function or structure, changes the energy flow through the wiring, and the electrodermal screening device measures the resistance and polarization at the affected acupuncture points. It thus provides a picture of the balance of related systems that are interconnected through the wiring. This is a study and a comment that Dr. Julia made in about 1992, I think is where she put it. So we owe her a great debt for the work that she's accomplished. Speaking of studies, I wanted to mention that there are now studies available, again, mostly from France, Benveniste, I think I noticed on one of your slides, which show magnetically and electrically the exact existence and locations of the meridians and acupuncture points. That's been physically proven now. Now, post-World War II and leading into the Korean War, which is 1950 to 53, and the Vietnam War, 1955 to 75, the French acupuncture masters became more prolific with their publications. Foremost among those great acupuncture masters was Dr. Nguyen Van Nie, who came to France from Vietnam. Dr. Van Nie was most renowned for his insights into advanced energetic concepts of acupuncture and energy flow. He was well known and respected, along with other luminaries like Albert Chamfrault, who published multiple volumes translating and bringing the ancient classics of acupuncture from Chinese into French, and also one of my personal heroes, and I'm sorry I couldn't find his picture, Dr. Jean-Claude Duras. And Dr. Duras brought us modern applications and interpretations of classical acupuncture, most famously in the realm of women's problems and hormonal issues. He worked with a group of researchers using radioactive isotope TE99, gee, nice, which made the entire acupuncture meridian system visible to CAT scan cameras. They validated the ancient Chinese meridian system as being 100% correct, exactly as written more than 3,000 years ago. That's pretty amazing. And these great doctors moved acupuncture into mainstream medicine in France. As the European countries recovered and began their climb back into democracy and modern economics, a great deal of that amazing French information began to filter into Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. Professor Dr. Johannes Bischko of Vienna, Austria, initiated a large international medical acupuncture association that is still active and influential today, and almost immediately we begin to see the German thought and cultural patterns become primary in the continuing development of acupuncture. That good old dependence on quality German technology. They want to do it with a machine. So the famous picture of Dr. Fohl, of course, this is one of the main ones that we all have. Dr. Fohl, with his colleague, the engineer Fritz Werner, are credited with the development of what is now termed electroacupuncture according to Fohl. So it's according to Fohl, that guy. Right. Or EAV, beginning in 1953. They developed a device called Kreis and Fritz. This is a newer model, actually. Diatherapuncture for the measurement of the acupuncture points. I've seen one of the earlier models of this one that was actually built with tubes, like we saw in the ancient TVs. So that's the kind of technology they started with. So it's amazing they accomplished what they did. I found this picture on eBay, I think. Can't remember. And then this is another with the Crimson Probe. Thus began a lifelong search to identify and correlate different disease states and changes in the electrical resistance of specific acupuncture points. Within a short period of time, the KNF was replaced by a device designed and developed by the famous Kindling Company, which you see represented here today with Gord Johnston. This is one of the oldest and most respected of the German manufacturers of EAV devices, without doubt. However, within a short period of time, there were other devices developed, and a few years later, the Dermatron was manufactured by the Pitterling Company in Germany and became the recognized standard for EAV devices. This is a page out of our EAV manual. In the actual true method of EAV, according to Fohl, there are approximately 780, some say 850 identified points. Here you can see a copy from out of our page. And Dr. Yu has that one copy moving around somewhere. What we did was we took all of the information from Dr. Fohl's books, and we coordinated it into systems and so on. And so each page in the part 1 shows you a location of the point graphically, a verbal description of where the point is, what the point is related to and what meridians, the energetic relations, what disease entities can be tested on it, and then down at the bottom, what remedies can be tested for diagnostic and for therapeutic purposes. The information compiled and cataloged by Dr. Foll and his colleagues over the following nearly 30 years is one of the greatest gifts we have from this era of research and development. And this is where we now move into the present. See, the history part wasn't totally bad, was it? In the early years of this development, Dr. Foll organized a group of physicians into a large association for the advancement of this method. This is a highly respected organization that still exists in Germany today and which is one of the sponsoring groups at the famous annual Medicine Week Congress in Baden-Baden, Germany. Within this group of physicians, we found not only Dr. Foll, but also the dentist, Dr. Fritz Kramer, famous for the low-pressure electrode tip and the charts with the odontons. That's what we call them, isn't it? Odontons. The connections between the teeth and the organs. And Dr. Franz Morel, the father of bioresonance therapy. But let me back up. And we want to think about that last statement I made in where I said that we also use this for therapeutic purposes. Okay, the legend is, I'm changing your legend a little bit. At one of the many think tank meetings in Freudenstadt, Dr. Foll was on the platform testing one of his colleagues and demonstrating how they were working with the heart meridian and its points. This fellow had a definite heart problem, and they were working out a way to determine and exactly specify what was going on. After an hour or so, I suspect the poor demonstratee had a very small corner. I'll pass this around. You want to catch it, Rick? There's a nice tip in there. I suspect this poor demonstratee had a very sore finger because, and you'll remember the crimson probe. At any rate, they used 750 pounds of pressure with this pointy tip. So that's about almost 700 grams of pressure. I mean, horrible. I mean, painful. And so this poor old guy probably had a very sore finger. At any rate, they all decided to take a lunch break. And after lunch, they went back at this poor victim, demonstratee. And lo and behold, there was no response on the heart meridian. Well, Dr. Foll was not impressed. And trust me, after having met this great man several times, you didn't want to see him upset. In the end, they discovered that the poor man had put his heart medication into, put his heart medication into his shirt pocket in case he needed it. And when they took it out of his pocket, the readings of heart damage returned. And thus was born not just point testing, but medication testing. Because Germany had a large and flourishing homeopathic industry with DHU, Stauffenwalla, it was easy for them to begin using nosodes and homeopathics for diagnostics and to begin testing various remedies and medications for therapy. Remember that Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, the father of homeopathy, was German, even though he died in France. But that's a story for another day. And here we arrive at the basic method that Dr. Yu and Dr. Cass have been teaching you. There are now at least 50 studies proving the efficacy of this diagnostic method with specific indications. There are an estimated 100,000 practitioners worldwide using this method or one of its variations on a regular basis in practice. Whenever you become frustrated with or unsure about your testing, just have patience. This is a manual technique combined with sophisticated, nowadays anyway, technology. Like learning to ride a bicycle, once you get the hang of it, there'll be no keeping you at home. For the dentists who already work with their hands on a manual basis and dexterity, this is a technique you can usually pick up quickly. Some of the physicians, it takes us a little bit more wrapping our heads around the reliability and the reproducibility. So I urge you to listen to the comments and suggestions you're getting here at this boot camp and then go home and practice. Learn the basics and the correct manual technique you are seeing here now. Once that is mastered, you'll quickly begin to apply this regularly in your practice. What can I see for the future? Well, I once heard the study of biological or energy medicine compared to falling in love with a jealous mistress. Well, or a mister for us ladies. I tell you to warn your wives or significant others that once your interest in testing and treatments is whetted, you, like so many of us, will be hooked and looking for more and more information. However, as is very typical for German formal protocols, the students or colleagues do not correct or alter the work of the master, and especially not before his passing. Dr. Fohl very jealously guarded his discoveries and his innovations. When Dr. Hartwig Schuldt, and also later when OIRF, offered to help Dr. Fohl write his first books, we were accused of stealing Dr. Fohl's stuff, and Dr. Schuldt was summarily kicked out of the club. In the end, Dr. Schuldt and Dr. Fohl did collaborate on a treatise in 1979, which to this day remains the basic text for this method. I recently found a copy of this book selling on Amazon for about $850. Dr. Schuldt became one of the official translators of Dr. Fohl's books and also accompanied OIRF staff on our first group tour to Germany back in 1981. Then Dr. Fritz Kramer came to Dr. Fohl with some ideas for a different measuring tip, hopefully, and that wouldn't hurt the patients so much, and he got turfed out of the club. Then Dr. Morell came along with the idea that the tested remedy didn't have to physically be in the measuring circuit, that you could send the information via radio wave to a receiver that was in the measuring circuit, and you could still get a reading on it. Energy. We're talking about energy. That was an interesting concept, but guess what? Out you go, buddy. And so it went until the mid-1970s and early 1980s when Dr. Fohl actually traveled to the US to give some lectures and demos. But there can never be static development with such a dynamic method. Even in Dr. Fohl's own association, innovation and change started almost immediately. That's not to say his contributions were wrong or weren't effective, but rather that other brilliant minds could envision different ways of reaching the same goals. As we master a technique or method, whether it is diagnostic or therapy, we first seek to fit the method into our daily work and practice. Then, as we become proficient with the method, the next step is to begin altering the procedure so that it is easier to manually complete in your practice, or you have a better explanation or understanding of it, or whatever. During Dr. Fohl's last years with us in this world, many changes rapidly became apparent. First, there was the change to the low pressure and alternate probe tips, then the change away from aluminum honeycombs, and later a change to all silver electrodes and a method called biological functions diagnosis, or BFD. A few years later, Dr. Helmut Schimmel emerged from BFD and developed Vega. Instead of relying on points for diagnostic information, Dr. Schimmel proved that we could rely on the use of silver electrodes and tested multiple homeopathic test sets on one point to gain the diagnostic criteria. All changes, all stories for another day, but the key here is that this method is not static. Once you've learned a correct, basic manual technique for point and medication testing, exactly what you're being taught here this weekend, and have applied it successfully, then it's time to look to the future. This is when you will look at ways to make the testing faster or more precise or more specific to your own practice, just as Dr. Yu has done. What you are learning here is a basic testing technique similar to what Dr. Fohl developed. I would love to hear from you one year from today and know how you are working with this method and where you're taking it in your practice. This is when we can look at other alternatives for diagnostics. Already you are using various biological treatment methods and can now monitor which are the most effective and whether or not your patient is complying with your recommendations. It's not necessary for you to know or remember all the dates and names that I've told you about today, but rather it's most important that you understand that we have a rich and long-standing history for this method. And I can assure you that now, thanks to the efforts of physicians and researchers around the globe, we have ample proof, including multiple blind, double blind, and blind practitioners and I don't know, that this method of point and medication testing is effective and it is reproducible. If you're interested, I can give you a sheet with a list of some of the studies for EAV. Most of these are older general studies, some of Dr. Tsway's studies, and some are newer, specific to the Medtronic instrumentation. And I show you these for the skeptics among you, as well as those you will encounter among your patients and your colleagues. Also, I've got some slides here. I would have loved, Simon wants me to move on, so I won't spend too much time on it. There's a number of books that I can recommend. I have a sheet I can hand out to you. Justinian's Flea was interesting. This is the medication testing report. If you're interested in, from the Institute, from my institute, if you're interested in looking at how EAV was done by Dr. Foll, you can go to Rob's classes, or I have a report here that was taken from Dr. Kramer's books, actually, Fritz Kramer, and you've got some good suggestions on how to learn the testing, how to do the testing, and so on and so forth. This book I think you may have seen before. This is the book by Pischinger and Heine on the extracellular matrix and the ground regulation. This is a critical basic textbook. This also another basic textbook. Roland van Wyk, professor doctor of course, is one of the colleagues of Fritz Albert Popp and is taken on. This also becomes a basic textbook. Oshman with his energy medicine. This is an American, a scientific basis, a good representation. And then this is the English version of the book that Simon mentioned, The Silent Revolution. This is truly revolutionary, this book. This will change your whole understanding not only of cancer and AIDS, but viruses. And Juliana Sacher, who has spoken on a number of our tours, is also continuing a lot of the work with viruses. And this is my institute, and I thank you for your attention, and I'll turn you back over to the doctor guys.
What about the tour? Talk about a little bit about the tour. Yeah.
The tour?
Yeah.
I have a... This will be my 43rd group of doctors that I'm taking over to Germany this fall. We normally try to connect with the Baden-Baden Medicine Week because I can pull some good speakers out of the Medicine Week, but they're already traveled there and we don't have to travel to them. And we have a broad selection. We try to give you a broad scope of interest so that you see not just one company or one presentation. We take you to the Medicine Week where you've got floors. I think they say there's 230 exhibits. And you see a little bit of everything for lucky people like Tom who speak German. Most of the lectures at Medicine Week are in German, but this year we'll have quite a bit of English. And then I arrange English language lectures for our group privately. And we try to stay in a nice hotel, family run, and good meals and drink some good beer. Okay? And I have some brochures and my card. And for all of you, if you leave me your email address or your card, my colleague Elaine will make sure that you get onto our mailing list. We send out a free newsletter once a month, and we have articles from people like Dr. Yu and Dr. Gallitzer, Dr. Binder, and so on. And we'd be happy to have you join us.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.